making sure that the generations to come and the survivors to come never have to go through what I went through. That it's going to change somehow, some way, so that nobody else has to go through what I went through, the way that I went through it. The enablers, the people that tried to call us money hungry or liars, that they do not have to go through what we went through.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate Bryan. One Girl Revolution is a multimedia platform, a podcast, and a nonprofit dedicated to highlighting the stories of inspiring women and girls who are changing the world through their lives. If you've been here before, you know the drill, but if you're new here, please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We have a new podcast episode every single week, and you don't want to miss a story. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. We're on YouTube at One Girl Revolution, and you can find all of our social media links, podcast episodes, documentaries, videos, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. On today's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, I welcome Trinea Gonczar. You may be familiar with Trinea because of her earth-shattering testimony in the Larry Nassar case that brought Nassar to justice. Trinea stood alongside hundreds of other women and girls who had been sexually assaulted by the infamous Olympic doctor. I remember watching Trinea's testimony shortly after it happened and being blown away by her strength, resilience, and determination to speak the truth, to speak for herself, and to speak up for so many other women. She is a warrior, a hero, and I'm so honored to have her on to share her story and to talk about the great work that she's doing with Avalon Healing Center now to help other survivors of assault and trauma. You're going to be so energized and empowered by this episode. Trinea is going to make you want to stand up, speak up, and do everything you can to support survivors. Listen to today's episode and please share it. Without further ado, here's Trinea. Trinea, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I am so excited to have you on. I feel like it's been a long time coming because you and I have been talking about this for a long time and you're doing such incredible work. And so I'm really excited for you to share about everything that you're doing. But before we get into your own story and all the great work that you're doing, I'd love to ask you, who is a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
Well, I have two technically, but I really have four. My mom obviously is the first, because she's had to go through all of this with me as a mother. And what I've learned from her to be on the side of the person that's having to realize that this is your daughter that's gone through this. And see her navigate that with grace and kindness, and also not understanding so many things, but just trying to be there. That has, not everyone has that. And so that for me, she's been my rock. And also Kimberly Hurst, our executive director and founder, she has really shown me the work, the importance of the work, and also the importance of myself as I'm the survivor, as also an employee and working within the organization, just kind of recognizing, not every day is going to be a good day. And we need to have some self-care and some grace to ourselves, which I am not good at. So it's been watching her work through this and watching her organize the staff and just out of her own goodness of her heart put this organization together, because she saw the disparities and the need for this in this community and just, started it. It's unbelievable. Amazing.
It's such an amazing community. And I've been so grateful to spend time with you and some of your colleagues at Avalon. And I hope to do even more stories to highlight the great work that you're doing. And like you said, Kim she's doing such amazing things and really feeding the souls of everybody involved in Avalon. So I love what you're doing and I can't wait to talk more about it. But I want to talk about your story. So I'm always interested in the evolution of the person, right? All the things that we experience throughout our lives play a role in who we become and who we're becoming still. So I would love to rewind and talk a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, I am from Lansing, Michigan, a little town that unfortunately was the breeding grounds and the ground zero of the Larry Nassar case, the starting of that, because he was my trainer before he was a doctor. So I was a gymnast at Great Lakes Gymnastics, which then transferred into Twistars. But we had John Geddard as our coach, and we had Larry Nassar as our trainer. And so I spent 5 days a week for 13 years with John and Larry. And you know, Larry was very good at fixing our bodies to be able to make us compete injured and compete well. Aside from that, he also was using his power medically to use our bodies as sexual assault victims, but under the guise of medical treatment. So for me, starting at 8, I had no idea. I always assumed, it's not like you go and you have strep throat and you get diagnosed by a doctor and you get given a medicine that you go to another doctor to double check that you have strep throat and that the medicine they gave you is an accurate medicine. You trust the physician. They go under the do no harm oath. And so I really believed in Larry. And also he fixed me a lot of times: wrists, shins, ankles, toes, arches of my feet, so many things. And so I was a perfect victim, because the treatment was designed initially for lower hip or lower back and hip. And I was a lower back and hip injury. I had a dislocated hip, which caused lower back pain. So this treatment was specifically for that. And so I always assumed that that was a necessary treatment. And it wasn't until I was 37 years old, I had heard other allegations come forward, but they were always dropped or they were always moved past. And it wasn't until I was 37 when I heard Rachel Denhollander come forward about her story. And then I saw the video of Larry speaking to Detective Andrea Mumford, explaining that not only that the treatment was medical, but that he never did any sort of intravaginal treatment. And that's when I really knew that he was lying, because that's what I had. I had multiple intravaginal treatments. And I was seeing these girls do these impact statements, these young girls, 15, 16, 17-year-old girls, and thinking, how can I sit back and watch them do this and not be standing with them? And so I asked if I could do an impact statement. At this time, I was Jane Doe B43. And the day that I did my impact statement, the Olympians decided to speak. So they were last minute ads, but they opened up the morning, and I thought to myself, well, this is great, because they're going to speak. They're taking, there was media everywhere. It was crazy, but they're going to speak and the media is going to be focused on them. And I wanted to go public only because my old teammates were the ones that were with him 5 days a week. These other girls that were speaking were part of the Monday clinics or sometimes at MSU Sports Medicine. And I identified that they were maybe one or two or less than a handful of times where my former teammates were abused for years. And so I needed to put a face to those teammates of mine. And so that's kind of how it all started for me, because my impact statement was second to last. They had it as like a closing statement. And it was the first time that he broke down hysterical, completely hysterical, shaking to my impact statement, which in turn, so the Olympians then were part of the media, but then it was the Olympians and me and the girl that broke him, or the girl that made a monster human. And it changed my life, that moment. But that same day, one of the girls that did their impact statement, she was much younger. She attempted suicide that night. And so she was put in a mental facility, which was absolutely the worst place to put her in. That's more traumatizing than, just being in a regular hospital room with regular doctors. That's the worst place they could have picked for her, right? So a week later, she gets let out and then attempts suicide again. And that's when I started to searching for places that support survivors of sexual violence, because you would think in a case such as ours, with the magnitude and the amount and the media that we had, that there would be people lined up, therapists lined up, support systems lined up, and that was not the case. And I think really it was due to the mass quantity of us coming forward. So there was really, not one therapist that could support hundreds of us. But I really wanted to find support for her. Because I did not think at 15 she was getting help that she needed. So I started doing my own research, and people kept telling me, you need to talk to this woman, Kimberly Hurst, she's in Detroit. You have a place in Detroit. And so I did. I reached out to Kimberly Hurst, and that's kind of what led me here. If there's more about my story back then, we can rewind a little bit more, but that's like in a nutshell of how I got to the work that I'm in now.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that because it's so amazing, again, what Avalon is doing and what you're a part of there. But I want to ask you about that day in court, because I know it takes so much courage. It takes so much courage for every single person who is a survivor to stand up and say, this is not right, this happened to me, to share their story. Of course, yours was amplified because you had so much media there. And I know myself from doing media and putting, personal details about my life out there, there's always support, but then there also can be a lot of backlash where you get people on Twitter who don't really know you, don't really know your story other than what you've shared. But they make assumptions or assertions about who you are as a person. And I know that happened with all of you who stood up, not just on that day, but the hundreds of women that stood up. There was positive feedback and negative. But what was your experience that day and just some of the feedback that you got?
Well, ironically, I didn't get any bad feedback that day. If anything, I got thousands of private messages from survivors all around the world, with messages of, I didn't kill myself today because of you, or this happened to me and I'm in Italy, or I'm in Peru, or I'm in China. And what do I do? Who do I go to? And at this stage, after my impact statement, once I realized, because I never had any idea what was going to take place for me in the aftermath of that impact statement. But I started to get these messages, and looking back, I had no education and no, way to respond to them appropriately to make sure that they were getting the best answers. And so, but there were thousands of them, and I was getting them. And then that was extremely overwhelming, because I was realizing then this is way bigger than us, and survivors are everywhere, and every journey is going to be different. Everyone's is going to look different, and not everyone's going to have the media attention like this. And that in itself was extremely intimidating, because you just have tons of media, clicks, snaps, shots, people asking to speak. After my impact statement that night, I was getting gas in Lansing, and I had a man walk up to me at the gas station, of all places, just a regular guy with crocodile-sized tears in his eyes. And he said to me, "Can I hug you?" And at that moment, his tears were so big that I just hugged him. But what that did for me after, I get in my car and I'm just like, like, what's happening right now? Like, what is happening to me right now? How is this my life all of a sudden? And I knew then that my life was never going to be the same. It was never going to go back to being the same.
Well, and I think the fact that you stood up and, you had hundreds of other women stood up, it gave other women courage. And even Rachel Denhollander, who I've had on the podcast before, her standing up challenged so many other women to stand up in this specific case. But I know there are so many other survivors, not just in gymnastics. And you and I have talked about in every single industry, in every single community, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church groups, gym classes, schools. Like, unfortunately, this is rampant in our culture, and we need people to speak up like yourself. And it's just so inspiring to me to see so many of you as women stand up and stand together. And a friend of ours here at One Girl Revolution, Brooke Baldwin from CNN, she talks about huddle, how we need to support our sisters and stand together. And I just remember seeing the images of you standing in this courtroom, but like you're surrounded by all these women, these like powerhouse, amazing women who've been through hell and back. But it's just such a testament to how resilient women are. And, speaking up and speaking out is going to save so many others.
Well, and the thing that I've learned is that the reason that we want people to speak out and speak up is because we've realized predators and perpetrators are typically serial. And so in your mind, you assume this was just me. This just happened to me. I did something to warrant this. I wore something, all of that rape culture jargon that's just embedded in our brains for so long is it most likely there's more before you, and then there's going to be more after you. And the importance of speaking up and speaking out is to be able to get these perpetrators out off the streets. And the more that we can do that, the better chances we have at safe cities, safe communities, because the perpetrator wants you to think it's just you and wants to keep you silent and wants to be able to continue doing the things that they have been capable of doing. But we're always in our brains thinking it was just me. And the thing about Rachel, she knew that it wasn't just her. She knew there were going to be hundreds. And since our case, the trickling effect of dominoes, it's one leading to the next, giving courage to the next. And we're seeing that happen now. I mean, Canada just had a call for an independent investigation. And 2 weeks ago, they had 70 persons. And now they have 400. And that has been something that this is the tip of the iceberg really for these kind of things. This is really just the beginning.
Yeah. And I think there are oftentimes, and the Larry Nassar case is a perfect example of it. There are oftentimes other people involved, right? You hear that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, but it really takes a village to cover up all the abuse. And so I think there were stones that were overturned in this case. I think you're going to see that in Canada and all these different cases where there are other people that are covering up for what they know is going on.
Well, that's the thing. When you have an institution or an organization that's fighting the independent investigation versus an internal investigation, it's due to the people that they don't want to expose versus the people that they actually want to figure out what went wrong. And so when you have these investigation teams like Michigan State, there's still 6,000 documents they won't release. And there's a reason. And it's, those enablers and those people of power that were either told or were informed about this situation and this perpetrator that didn't do the right thing. And as a result, multiple survivors that should never have been assaulted were. And, people always want to push the reason that this happened on somebody else. Nobody ever wants to take responsibility. And, we're even looking at that with the feds right now, that it's people doing the right thing for the right reasons instead of doing the wrong thing to benefit the institution or organization.
Yeah, and I know so many pieces of the case are still ongoing. Obviously, Larry Nassar is in prison. John Geddert, your coach, was about to be charged with 24 felony counts for crimes ranging from human trafficking to sexual assault, and he ended up committing suicide. And some of the other things are still ongoing. But I just think it's so inspiring, everything that you've come through, Trinea, and that you're able to speak up. And I don't know. I know that a lot of things in our lives, we don't necessarily find closure. I think that there are, justice can be served. And I think that might be an aspect of closure, but I'm sure through the work that you're doing now kind of helps you find some sort of closure, right?
To be honest, it didn't help me find closure. It helped me find my way. Your body keeps score, right? So even if your brain and your mind shuts out these kind of things, your body still knows. And there was always something in me that felt lost and felt confused and felt, I really just didn't understand what my purpose was. And this wasn't, I didn't go into my impact statement to have my impact statement go global. I didn't go into my impact statement to have, it was 2 hours before I spoke that I decided to go public only. And again, that was for my teammates to be able to have a face. So I had no idea at all that things were going to change, but finding my way here is what gave me back hope, because it was really, really dark for me for probably a good 4 months after my impact statement. And also being in that space of having all of these people reaching out to me and me not knowing where to tell people to go or what was the best response. I was so worried about harming somebody or not having a resource or not responding that I started to really lose hope for what was our future, what was the future for my family, what was the future for the kids to come and the generations to come. I was starting to be really afraid and really dark. And this path chose me, and I've listened. And it's given me back hope. It hasn't given me closure, because I'm still not at that place where the closure has really arrived. But I'm working to get to that.
And I think it's a journey, right? Like, we may never find closure for things that we've experienced or things that we've gone through. But like you said, they're like these wounds that we carry with us. But it's always really inspiring to me when people take those wounds and they're like, how can I heal other people? Or how can I stop, this from happening to other people and children? The stuff that you're dealing with, and even sharing that story about that young gymnast, and just the trauma that children are going through in this day and age. And with social media, there are so many predators out there in so many different ways that it's like, they don't even have to be a part of a group now. It's like, kids get on social media and they're perpetrators.
Watch In Tandem, the new short documentary by One Girl Revolution, which highlights the incredible story of Caitlin Cullen and her restaurant in Milwaukee, The Tandem. The Tandem is more than a restaurant. It's a family, a community that at its height was a bustling restaurant serving food and supporting every single person who walked through its doors in one way or another. If someone needed a job, you got it. Having a bad day and needing a smile or a laugh, The Tandem's got you. Having a rough time and need support, The Tandem isn't just a restaurant, it's your family. They got you. When COVID hit in March 2020, The Tandem stepped up to serve the community in a new way. They stopped selling food to customers and started solely feeding people in need. The Tandem community ended up feeding over 115,000 people during the first year of the pandemic. Absolutely incredible. Get to know Caitlin and the Tandem story in One Girl Revolution's new short documentary, In Tandem. Watch In Tandem today at onegirlrevolution.com or on YouTube. Please watch and share this inspiring story.
But you've continued. So since everything, since your testimony, you've continued to be a voice and be very outspoken, not just in your day-to-day work, but you've written some great pieces. You wrote a great piece last year in the Free Press, which I will post the link. And then you also wrote this amazing piece in The Insider about Simone Biles. Can you talk a little bit about maybe like what made you want to write those pieces, and just a little bit about them?
Well, I'll first talk about John Geddert, because he was my coach. And I think that people don't realize, there was only a handful of us that are part of the Nassar case that had John Geddert as a coach. And there's no stage in any point of my life that I've ever wanted anyone to end their life or decide that was the way out. And the reason I decided to write that was because I had so many feelings about what happened with John Geddert, and so many instances of how Larry and John almost used each other as good cop, bad cop. And I was getting to the point where I was sick of people telling my story for me, that I just started to write. And as I was writing, I mean, that in the Detroit Free Press, that was like 2 full pages of their newspaper. And thank them for that. I thank them for posting the entire article, because I know that that's not the norm, specifically for print and journalism. But the story really explained the how and the why. How did this happen? That's the question I get all the time. How did this happen? Like, here's how it happened. Here's how it happened. Here's how it started anyways, and how it continued. I don't know all of those pieces, but here's definitely how it started. And John was unfortunately part of that. And he took the way out that ended the investigation for him, ended the investigation for the family, and traumatized as many of the survivors that possibly were going after him for his abuse. And I wanted people to understand from a perspective of a person that lived it, breathed it, saw it, witnessed it, went through it, spent nights at his house, ate dinner with Larry. I mean, really encompassed the entire experience in the reality of my gymnastics experience. And so I wrote that piece too, because that part for me was a little bit of a closure of the John Geddert piece, but also an informational piece about actually how it really did start.
I was going to say just about, and this got me thinking about closure, you know, and that question is like sometimes, and I think John Geddert is a perfect example. And I personally, like, I think a lot of people unfortunately have had experience with suicide in their family or friend group, or, you know, people who have tried to commit suicide. And I think there are situations like that where sometimes we have to find closure ourselves. And so you, like, reading that piece, I felt like I was experiencing everything that you experienced, the manipulation and, you know, the coercion and all the different things that Larry was doing and John was doing, and like the abuse, even how abusive John was as your coach, just verbally abusive and manipulative. And it just is so interesting, and those stories need to be told. But I think sometimes there are situations, not all situations, but where somebody's not going to give us closure, and suicide is exhibit A of that, where someone's not going to give you the closure that you need. And so you need to find a way to find that closure on your own. And I say that's a shout out too, to like all the women out there who have been through terrible relationships or ghosted. You know, I've had friends that have shared stories like that, where it's like, hey, so-and-so is not going to give me the closure that I need. And so I need to find that closure, and for you to speak the truth and share exactly what happened, you know, so people know, the public deserves to know. Even though John ended his life, people deserve to know who he was.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, the relationships and how they can look is a trainer and a coach, versus it being so outlandish. She's the Olympic team doctor. I mean, it didn't start there. And I also just wanted people to understand that it's more the norm than it is the not norm when you have people that can groom, and perpetrators that have intention and time spent intentionally with children specifically. And John Geddert, unfortunately, regardless of his wrongdoings, he never showed up at court to support us. He maybe messaged a few of us with, you know, I'm sorry that happened to you. But I guarantee you, had it been his daughters who were gymnasts, who were my teammates, which, you know, I send them my love always, every day from afar. Had it been them, I don't think Larry Nassar would be alive.
Interesting to think about, isn't it? So let's talk about the insider piece. What made you want to write the Simone Biles piece?
So Simone Biles, you know, she was really the last, and she referenced this, the last standing competing survivor of the Nassar case, and going into the Olympics. She was the best. She was competing skills that they weren't even going to value the correct value for the skills, because they didn't want other gymnasts to try them because they were so difficult. And I remember seeing her at the Olympic trials, and, you know, from one gymnast to another, I know that it's not so easy or so obvious for others to see it, but you can see it on their face, how they're going to compete. And I saw already that Simone was in a space she was in her head. And when you're in your head as a gymnast, you can't be in your head. You have to be in your muscle memory. You've trained these skills to be able to go out, not to be in your head to do it, to be in your physical body to do it, and to do it right. And leading into Tokyo is where Simone was abused by Larry. And so I was concerned about that. And the FBI, there was an FBI investigation report that was dropped 2 days before the Olympics started, the gymnastics Olympics started. And even though I knew the FBI was involved and had done exactly what MSU had done and silenced and, continued the predator behavior, even though they're the FBI, I knew that reading that report dropped me to my knees and stopped sobbing to see our country, nation's strongest Bureau of Investigation, the highest level, be no better than the other institutions and organizations that did it wrong just the same. USAG, USOC, MSU. I mean, they were no better. And that literally dropped me to my knees and sobbing. And so again, at that moment, I knew Simone is not going to be okay. Like, if she reads this, and I'm hoping that people are protecting her from this so that she's not seeing this, because if Simone is not in the right headspace and she competes these tricks, we are going to see on the world's news a girl break her neck and die due to having such triggers that put her in a place where she is not safe to compete, even though everyone wanted her to compete because she's the best and they wanted to see this moment of seeing the best compete. And I mean, they had actually even had a private gym rented for her hours away from the training camp and the Olympic Games to try to get her in the right headspace to be able to compete. And there was just no way, the triggers were too big, and she didn't have to compete she made more of a statement by not competing and standing with those other girls and letting the other girls compete and win than she did by competing and falling on every event and getting injured and having that be her exit to the sport.
Yeah, I think it's so inspiring what she did, just to stand up, and we all need to do that too. Sometimes, you have a great opportunity, or you have something that you want to do, a trip you want to go on, whatever. It doesn't have to be the Olympics, but we need to take care of ourselves, and self-care is so important. And I thought it was so inspiring that here she is standing on the world stage, and she was like, nope, I'm going to step back. I'm going to let my teammates and support them. And she showed up to everybody else's, competitions. And like, it's incredible. So,
well, and I really wanted her as another Nassar survivor to know that I saw her. I saw her before. I saw me, and I saw her, and I just wanted her to know that somebody saw her. And so that was really the original reason for writing that piece. But I also wanted other people to read from me, because it's not the Olympic stage that I was on, but it was a work presentation. And I am in a book that I didn't even get asked to be in, where I'm the point of the book, of Malcolm Gladwell. And I'm watching a presentation the same exact week of the Olympics and see a face and put me in the bathroom throwing up, because I was so angry and triggered, and what it's like to be a real survivor that has to do real day things, go to work, pick up their kids, go to school, and then still have to try to put a brave face on after vomiting in the toilet because you just saw a face of somebody who used you as a financial gain for a book that they didn't even talk to you about. I mean, there's just so many pieces to that, where what survivors go through every single day, that nobody knows about. They don't want to talk about that part. They don't want to talk about what it's like to actually have to live and breathe every single day, wake up, get out of bed, get dressed, go to work, pick up your kids, act like everything's fine after you've been assaulted, however that came, and then have a trigger come out of nowhere and then still have to carry on. You know,
Right.
nobody wants to talk about that. And that was my Simone piece, because it was really, people don't get it that don't get it.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for situations like Simone Biles to actually show that it's okay to take a step
Yeah.
back. And your own story is that, like, we have to be talking about our own stories and our own experiences and advocating for ourselves, right? Like in our everyday lives, there are going to be situations where, you're triggered by something, or, you're just struggling with something, right? Like we all have these difficulties, even in our family lives, or you didn't sleep the night before, but just being open and honest and really kind of breaking the barriers and being able to talk about it, and normalize these discussions, whether it's, mental health or, being a survivor and going through something, and being able to talk about it, because it gives other people permission to talk about their stories too.
Well, and to give each other some grace, like this is what you train for as a gymnast. Like, you hope for college, but you dream for the Olympics. It's the only really major competition in the sport of gymnastics that you train for. And this was her moment to be that. And it wasn't, and she is living her best life right now. And to be honest, all of those Olympians now, like, the sport of gymnastics isn't broken. The sport of club gymnastics is broken. And when I look at the college gymnasts, because all of those Olympians are now college competing gymnasts, they are flourishing. The culture is so different. They couldn't be in a better space. But, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to have bad days, but it's also okay to say, today, I'm going to take a step forward, and I'm going to journal, or I'm going to call for counseling, or I'm just going to reach out and talk to somebody because I need to, or I'm going to tell the first friend that I have that I think will believe me, because, that first step is always the scariest step. And to be honest, for me, every step right now feels like a first step. So they're all kind of scary. And so for those people that think I'm so courageous and doing all those things that I throw up before I do them, I still get super nervous before I speak, and I still leave with tears in my eyes when people disclose to me the horribleness that they've gone through. Like, I'm still a full human being. And, like I said, this is just my way now. This is the direction that I'm going to be going. And I welcome anyone to join that with me.
Well, I know so many people have joined on board, and so many people are going to continue to join on board. I want to talk about University of Michigan, because there's a totally different case that you've gotten involved in. How did you meet your friend John, and tell me about his story in this case?
So John Vaughn, he is a former NFL football player from the University of Michigan. He played, I think, from 88 to 92, 2 back-to-back Rose Bowls. I mean, he was like a really big name in football for the University of Michigan. Well, he was also assaulted by Dr. Anderson, and ironically, Dr. Anderson also trained Larry Nassar, as well as Dr. Strauss, who's the Ohio State doctor that assaulted. So, there's just the curiosity of myself and many others of what that education must have been like to be having 3 of the largest serial predators coming out of one place, being the University of Michigan. But I was seeing this case happen, and as it was unfolding, it was so big and the magnitude of numbers was so large. And because it was majority men, I was realizing, because men are so, against that rape culture and toxic masculinity, and even just masculinity in general, men are much less likely to come forward or to speak out. And I was, as an organization, we're always looking to support men in this space, because sexual assault is not a women's issue. It's a human issue. And in fact, it's, 1 in 4, just depending on the statistics, it's 1 in 4 girls, but it's 1 in 6 boys, really. I mean, it's 1 in 33 that technically are reported, but really boys are just as susceptible as girls. They just don't talk about it. And so I'm watching this case and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, how can I get to these guys to offer them a place they can come here? You know, we have resources, we have advocates, we even have a building that they can come in, and especially if they're John Does, because University of Michigan, they're going to have some very big names, which most of them are John Does based on either their career that they're in, their, you know, additional career. But I was watching all these press conferences happen and these men that were speaking out, and I saw that John was one of the most, you know, forefront of the vocal ones. And so I reached out to him, mostly asking him to come see the organization, see the space. If the men wanted to come and use our conference room or have a meeting place or meet with advocates, you know, I wanted to be able to offer that support. So I asked him to meet. So my boss and I sit down thinking we're going to try to almost promote or offer these resources to him. And we're really talking to him and explaining the services that we provide and the kind of help that we can have, and this, you know, the cost, there's no cost, so they didn't have to pay anything. And in this meeting, John's just listening and he's ready to talk and kind of respond to what we said. And he looks directly at me in my eyes and he says, "You have no idea the honor it is of me to be sitting here across the table from you, Trinea Gonczar. I have studied you. I have watched your impact statement. I have learned from you. We have watched what you girls have done. You are our superheroes and you are my superhero." And I sat there across the table, unexpected, sobbing, looking at my boss and looking at him, literally saying to me, "You have no idea who you are to me and what you've done for me." And again, those moments that you're just so unprepared for something that reminds you why you're doing what you're doing and why you stay doing what you're doing. He reminded me in that moment, this is so much bigger than me. And, you know, we met for coffee after that because I really, again, wanted to understand the men that needed support and the ones that were on the forefront. And how could I, if that's how they look at me, or if that's how they're, you know, they're learning from me, let me just speak to them, you know, let me just talk to them. And before I knew it, we were planning the protest of John to get him out in the camper, which originally it was a tiny little tent that we got him, which was like a soccer mom tent because it was going to rain, which it started to rain. And we get him out there and, you know, we're thinking, how are we going to keep him safe? We're trying to figure out cameras, and are the police even going to let him stay? Like, there were all these things that went into this, but it was the fact that the survivors were not being heard, and the organization, the institution wasn't giving them an opportunity to even have a voice, and we're not even recognizing or identifying, and they just wanted to like brush this under the rug. These guys were old, this doctor's dead, you know, it's not our responsibility, it wasn't our problem, it's not our problem now, there's no assaults happening on our campus. And what, as a result of John being out there for as long as he was, it was the students coming up to him, tears in their eyes, saying thank you to him, and you've made me feel safer on this campus. You're bringing awareness to this campus, because my biggest fear being on campus is not failing my exams, it's getting raped. And how at our number one public institution in our country is that the concern every day for humans, students? The parents need to be hearing this. The donors to that organization need to be hearing this. Like, this institution, this university is not a safe place. The culture is not safe. And the university is still not doing anything to actually amplify the voices of the survivors, identify that it's happened, and make change. They just are protecting the brand, and they're trying to pretend that it didn't happen. And they are, you know, silencing the victims. And again, still, they're just going to carry on like they've done everything. And that's, again, the complete opposite way. If you're an institution or an organization that is facing something like this, if you would like to do it wrong, follow Michigan State and follow the University of Michigan.
Well, and they have to speak up at some point, right? Like, I think the fact that you guys continue your advocacy and continue to amplify, more and more voices have joined in
Yeah.
with you. And now having even current students, like you said, sharing their stories with you, but also posting about it on social media and
Mhm.
challenging the university. Like, at some point, I have to believe that at some point they have to speak up about it. And that university needs to become a safer place, because you think about like being a student, being a college student. I think about even like being a kid, being in, high school, middle school, and how I felt like I had all the problems of the world on my shoulders. But now with
Yeah.
social media, and now with sexual assault just being so prevalent in our culture, and I know it was back then, but it's like now we're
Yeah.
seeing it more and people are speaking out about it more. um, Young people are spending so much money to go to University of Michigan. Their parents are spending so much money to go to University of Michigan,
Yeah.
Michigan State, whatever. And like we talked about earlier, like they're covering it up. There's not there,
Yeah.
for every assailant, there are so many people that are covering these things up. And
Yeah.
so I'm sure that, and actually the person that comes to mind is actually Harvey Weinstein from Hollywood. And it's like, we know that there are more people that have done terrible things and that have covered up for Harvey Weinstein. Show it to us.
Mhm.
Like, tell us who those
Look at
people are.
Epstein.
Yeah, Epstein, exactly. So justice needs to be served in all
Mhm.
these cases. And so I just think it's so amazing and inspiring what you and John are doing and what you're building and standing together. It's so beautiful to see two survivors standing together, speaking up. I know that you're going to be able to help so many other people too through your partnership and through what you're building right now.
Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate.
Well, and what we're really focused on right now, because it hasn't happened, and again, I know this is really like the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg, as I keep mentioning, but it's two survivors, two completely separate cases, two completely different walks of life, two genders, two races, and standing in solidarity to fight sexual assault together. There never has been that. And now we do have this group and these people these survivors that are joining us. And we're really focused on being that movement, the movement of solidarity, where survivors have a community, a safe community that will show up for them every time, no matter what, whether it's sitting in front of the president's house at their university to get that president to either speak out or to get fired at this stage, if that's what needs to happen, because that now we're 2 for 2 at this stage. But showing that support to each other is the most beautiful gift that has come out of being assaulted and recognizing other survivors. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to speak about it. I can see it in the face. We can see it in the face. You can just say, today's not a good day. And I get it. But if I show up and John show up, we're showing up for that survivor. We're showing up in solidarity for those survivors, and we welcome that. Please know that that is always an option, and we are here.
I want to encourage everybody who's listening to get involved in what you're doing, to follow these cases, because I know that they are ongoing. If you're in the Michigan area, if you're in the Ann Arbor area, I know oftentimes I see you posting, Trinea, about that you guys are doing a protest or, standing outside the president's house or different things that people can get involved in. So I encourage them to follow everything that you're doing. I will, of course, post the links so people can follow you on social media and follow everything that you're doing. I can't have you on this podcast and not talk about Avalon. So I'd love to transition into Avalon. So tell me, you told a little bit about how you got connected to Avalon Healing Center, but tell me about what Avalon Healing Center does and a little bit more about your work with them.
So we're a comprehensive sexual assault center. Anything and everything that falls under the sexual violence umbrella, we support, and we are a free service. So if you're familiar with the rape kit, We have strategic places throughout the city of Detroit where we, at this stage, the majority of the hospitals don't even perform the rape kits. They call in our forensic nurse examiners and our advocate. They go out as a team of 2 and walk that person through not only the kit, but the advocacy, the safety planning. We have expert witness testimonies. We have a follow-up clinic, a wellness clinic, where a lot of pieces, after post-assault, your head's really jumbled and you have medications and now bruising showing up. We do a lot of follow-up work, but then we also do the advocacy side of things, because we know no one's journey is going to be the same, and that it could be 1 year you're great, and then it could be the next 5 years you're not great, and you need somebody to help you walk through that. And so we have no cap to our services. There's no cost to our services. Anyone that identifies as a survivor of sexual violence of any kind, we have a huge trafficking department. We do group therapy, we do yoga therapy, we do art therapy. We're moving into a huge center in the city of Detroit here, hopefully by the end of the year, where we're gonna really try to focus on being a one-stop shop for survivors of sexual violence. Because again, through these cases and through this work, when we start talking to people and realizing, looking around, what we need for our survivors is a one place where we're not having to send them out there and send them to this, and housing's over there, and go to this, you have to sit in court for this long. We're trying to make sure that they're supported and that they don't have to go through all of this stuff alone. And it's given me life again, to see the people that come every day with their hearts on their sleeve to make sure that these people and these survivors have someone in their corner. Because a lot of times it's a family member, a lot of times it's somebody that they have to go home to. And having someone and having an organization like this in the city of Detroit, it's a gift. And we're trying to expand, and we're hoping to expand as far and wide, every side of the globe that we can get to, because we know that they're out there, so many survivors out there that have nowhere to go, have no place to turn. And we are hoping to make sure that what we do here can be replicated, because survivors are everywhere.
You are such an example. And Avalon, for anybody who hasn't been there, I've been so grateful to spend a couple of times. I've been there, and every single time I walk in, and it's like this massive peace just falls on you, where you're just like, you feel like you're a part of a family. And that's really what you have created, is this safe place for people to just be themselves and share their stories, and being able to talk about it. And I'm a firm believer that, like, how can you move beyond something that's happened to you if you don't know how to talk about it, and you don't know how to talk about it in front of people that are going to love you and support you? And that's really what I've seen Avalon is. And I'm so grateful to be in Detroit and be able to spend time with all of you. But I hope that everybody looks to you as a resource. And, if people want to replicate what you're doing, I know that they can reach out and support you and find ways to work together and collaborate.
Yeah. Well, we are just launching the Avalon Institute as well, which is our online platform of educational trainings, because we recognize that people are looking for trauma-informed care, whether it's attorneys' offices or doctors' offices. We recognize that. And so we've just launched that. We had DTE do a matching gift of $10,000. We're hoping for the rest of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, moving into Mental Health Month, that people will still stay engaged and help us get that match. So you can go to avalonhealing.org. There's the donate page there, but there's also information about the DTE grant. And, we're really just trying to make bigger and better, more services, more providers to help, and more ways that we can make the community safer, and also survivors to have hope.
Yeah. Well, I hope that everybody reaches out to you, again, donate to you, follow you on social media. I always tell people that that's a free way that they can support the work that you're doing. So I know that our listeners will want to get involved and want to support you. Yes. I want to know, Trinea, what's next for you? What's next for Avalon? You mentioned the Institute, but I want to know, are you writing a book? Like, what kind of things are you working on right now? What can people expect out of you in the months and years to come?
I'm definitely working on a book. The book is actually more of a therapy piece for me, because of what I've realized is people like my writing. I apparently give, like you said, a place where people can almost go and like live my life and live that lived experience, whether it was good or bad, but you can just visualize yourself out of your own body. And so I'm really working on a book. That's slow progress, but John and I are working on building a program that he and I will be speaking, the We Are the Movement. But I'm also, working on being a mom. I'm missing these years right now. My children are 2 and 3.5, and I'm trying to savor those minutes because everyone says they're going to fly by. And then I'm going to see what's going to take me next, because I know it's going to be big, and I know it's going to be global, and I know that it's going to be, not maybe in my lifetime, but I'm hoping to see Avalon Healing Centers and other survivors that stand in solidarity and are ready to take the torch to carry this on, because it's been happening since the beginning of time, and it's about time to end. And I'm ready to lead that pack.
Well, you are such a leader, and I know so many people are inspired by the work that you're doing, and you're also a speaker. So if people want to have you come and speak, or have you and John come speak, I'm sure that they can reach out to you even on social media, but I will post all of those links. Trinea, I am so grateful for this time with you, but I just want to end on 2 quick questions.
Sure.
One is, if you could get to the very root of why you do what you do, what drives you every single day, what would that root be?
The root is making sure that the generations to come and the survivors to come never have to go through what I went through. That it's going to change somehow, some way, so that nobody else has to go through what I went through, the way that I went through it. The enablers, the people that tried to call us money hungry or liars, that they do not have to go through what we went through.
I lied. I actually have one other question for survivors out there. Before I ask you the final question, I know this is kind of a blanket question, but I'm just curious if there are survivors that are listening, no matter what their survivor story looks like, what would you say to other survivors out there?
First and foremost, I believe you, and I see you, and I'm here, even if it's just to know that I'm here physically, that there's a person in your corner, but that there are ways to heal. And the journey is not always easy, but it's worth it, because you deserve to heal. And this was not your fault. And when you're ready, we will be here.
Trinea, I am so grateful for you and for everything that Avalon is doing. And I will be sure to post all the links to your articles and how people can get in touch with you and how they can support Avalon. Again, please follow Avalon, follow Trinea, support them by donating, getting involved. If you have a story to share too, reach out, because we're all stronger together and we can support one another. So before I let you go, Trinea, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
I would say give your gut feeling more than you initially want to, because your gut really does speak, but give yourself grace when you maybe didn't trust that gut and it led you on a path that maybe isn't the best path, but that also you can change the direction of your life when you're ready and if you want to. And you don't have to stay, no matter what happened, no matter the gut, no matter the self-harm, no matter any of that, you don't have to stay where you've been. You can change, and there is hope. There is hope.
Trinea, you give me so much hope, and it's been so amazing spending this time with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing all your amazing work and for all that you do in the world. Thank you so much for being on the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, thank you so much.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number 1 Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number 1 girlrevolution.com.